teeth ripped into her side. Mama Bear roared, spinning, her massive paw slicing through the air. Her claws tore across a wolf's skull, splitting it open. Blood sprayed the snow in a crimson arc. Another wolf lunged for her throat. She caught it in her jaws and shook until the neck snapped like dry wood. The carcass hit the ground with a sickening thud. But there were more. Too many more. The storm swirled around the clearing, snow whipping in every direction, the air thick with growls and howls. Shadows darted between the trees, gray, lean, starving bodies, yellow eyes burning with hunger. The pack was everywhere. And behind her, pressed against her legs, were two trembling cubs. Their whines cut through the storm like broken glass. Mama Bear twisted her head for a heartbeat and saw them, tiny, fragile, pressed into the snow, their fur speckled with blood that wasn't theirs. Her heart thundered. She turned back, standing taller, blood dripping from her own wounds, and let loose another roar so loud it rattled the frozen trees. The wolves didn't back down. Hunger never does. 3 rushed her at once, teeth flashing. She met them with fury, her massive body a storm of muscle and claws. One wolf was hurled into a tree, its body cracking on the trunk. Another she pinned and crushed into the snow, the ground shaking from the force. The third dug into her shoulder, tearing flesh, hanging on with a death grip. She slammed herself against a rock, bones crunching beneath the pressure. The wolf yelped and went limp. She staggered forward, blood pouring from her wounds, and still the pack circled, their paws soundless on the snow. Her breath came ragged, steaming in the icy air. She was bleeding badly. She knew she couldn't last forever. But she also knew this: her cubs would not die tonight. Another wolf came for them. She spun with lightning speed, intercepting it mid-leap. Her paw crashed into its ribs, breaking them like twigs, throwing the body across the clearing. The cubs whimpered, pressing tighter to her legs. She snarled, lowering her head, daring the pack to come again. And they did. 5 at once this time. They swarmed her flanks, snapping, clawing, dragging her down. Teeth ripped into her haunches. One wolf clamped onto her back, tearing into her spine. She roared in agony, flailing, blood spraying the snow. But she refused to fall. She spun, crushing one under her weight, biting another clean in half. Her claws raked through fur and flesh, ripping a wolf open from throat to belly. The ground was a battlefield. Blood, broken bodies, and steaming breath clouding the air. The cub squealed again, and that sound gave her strength. The alpha appeared then. Bigger than the rest, scarred from battles long past, eyes glowing with a cold, ruthless hunger. He padded forward slowly, teeth bared, tail low, every muscle coiled like a spring. He didn't rush. He knew she was weakening. He wanted to finish it himself. Mama Bear growled, her body trembling from blood loss. She squared herself between him and her cubs, lowering her head. She could barely stand, but her spirit burned hotter than fire. The alpha lunged. The world exploded into fury. He crashed into her chest, teeth locking on her throat. She roared, claws raking his side, tearing chunks of flesh away. They rolled across the snow, 2 titans locked in a death struggle. The other wolves circled, howling, waiting to see who would fall. She bit down on his shoulder, shaking until blood gushed. He snapped at her face, catching her eye, blood blinding her vision. She slammed him into the ground, crushing him under her weight. For a moment, she had him. For a moment, she could feel victory. But her legs gave out. The alpha surged up, slamming her into the snow. His teeth sunk into her neck, tearing flesh. Pain ripped through her body. She roared, louder than the storm, and with the last of her strength, clamped her jaws around his throat. She shook, hard. Bone cracked. The alpha went limp, collapsing in the snow with a wet crunch. Silence fell. The wolves froze, their leader dead at her feet. Their yellow eyes shifted, fear breaking through hunger. One by one they slunk back into the trees, vanishing into the storm, leaving their dead behind. Mama Bear stood over the alpha's body, blood pouring from her wounds, her chest heaving. She looked back at her cubs. They were alive, terrified, but alive. She took one step toward them, then another. Her legs shook, her vision blurred. Her body was broken, shredded by teeth and claws. She lowered her head, nuzzling them gently, breathing in their warmth one last time. Then she sank to the snow. Her body went still. Her breath stopped. The cubs pressed against her, crying softly, not understanding. The storm raged on, burying the battlefield in white. But beneath the snow, the cubs were alive, because she had given everything. Snow fell in a quiet hush over the Montana woods, softening the world into white silence. The storm of the night before had passed, leaving the air sharp and bright, each breath like a knife of ice in the lungs. For 9-year-old Emily Carter, bundled in her oversized red coat and knitted hat with a puffball on top, the forest was a magical kingdom. She walked ahead of her father, Sheriff John Carter, crunching snow with her boots. The man was never far behind, tall, broad-shouldered, his service pistol at his side, even during a Saturday walk. His eyes, a steel gray, constantly scanned the tree line. Out here, in this part of Montana, danger and beauty always lived side by side. "Stay where I can see you, Pumpkin," John called, his deep voice carrying through the stillness. "I am," Emily called back, though she always strayed just a few steps farther than he liked. She wanted adventure, not protection. That's when she heard it. A sound unlike anything she had ever heard before. Thin, high-pitched cries, muffled and desperate. It wasn't a bird, and it wasn't the wind. Emily froze, her mittened hands tightening around the little stuffed wolf she carried everywhere. Her head cocked. There it was again. Whimpers. Tiny. Sad. She ran toward the sound before her father could stop her. "Emily!" John barked, but she was already climbing over a drift, sinking knee-deep into snow and stumbling toward a thicket of branches. And that's where she saw them. 2 bear cubs, no bigger than golden retrievers, huddled together in the snow. Their fur was matted with frost, their tiny bodies shivering violently. Their black eyes blinked up at her, full of confusion and hunger. One gave a weak cry that stabbed straight into her chest. Emily gasped, "Daddy, they're babies!" John was there in seconds, his hand already reaching for his pistol, instinct drilled by years of service. He scanned the tree line. His heartbeat roared in his ears. "Get back," he ordered sharply, his breath clouding. If there are cubs, the mother is close by. But as he crouched, his sharp eyes caught something else. Blood in the snow. A trail leading away into the deeper woods. The prints were huge, claw marks etched in crimson. His gut tightened. He knew what had happened. The mother was gone. Emily, oblivious to the grimness of the scene, was already kneeling in the snow. She pulled off her mittens and gently touched one cub's icy ear. "They're freezing. Daddy, they'll die out here." "Emily," John said slowly, his voice lower, heavier, "listen to me. These aren't pets. They're wild animals. Dangerous ones. We can't—" "They're just babies," Emily shot back, her little voice cracking. "Look at them." The cub pressed against her hand, desperate for warmth, and whimpered again. Something in that sound broke Sheriff Carter's hardened heart. For all his years of enforcing law, of holding a town together, of standing firm through crime and tragedy, this moment undid him. Emily looked up at him, eyes wide, wet, shimmering with innocence. "Please, Daddy." He exhaled a long cloud of steam, staring at the helpless creatures. His badge weighed heavy on his chest. The law was clear. Wildlife like this couldn't be taken in. They belonged to the wild or to animal control. But he was a father before he was a sheriff. "All right," he muttered finally, "just for tonight. We'll take them home, warm them up, and call animal services tomorrow." Emily's face lit like the winter sun. "Really?" "Really. But you listen close, Emily." He crouched so they were eye to eye, his voice firm. "They're not toys, not puppies. You stay calm around them, you hear?" She nodded so hard her hat nearly fell off. "Yes, Daddy, I promise." Together, they bundled the cubs into John's thick hunting jacket. The animals whimpered, then burrowed into the warmth, their tiny claws catching on fabric. Emily stroked their heads, humming softly as if she were rocking dolls. And in that moment, a bond was born. The Carter cabin sat on the edge of town, smoke curling from its chimney. The scent of pine logs and stew lingered in the air. That night, Emily sat cross-legged on the living room rug, two bear cubs wrapped in a blanket before the fireplace. Their little bellies rose and fell as they nursed on a dish of warm milk John had grudgingly prepared. John leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching his daughter beam brighter than he had seen in months. Since Emily's mother had died, she had been quieter, sadder, always clutching that stuffed wolf. Now her cheeks glowed again, her laughter ringing as one cub pawed at her sleeve. "See, Daddy?" she whispered, as if to scare them to wake. "They needed me." John swallowed hard. She wasn't wrong, but the gnawing in his gut wouldn't leave. By the next morning, news of two orphaned bear cubs had already reached the sheriff's office. Calls came in from townsfolk, warnings, fears, even offers to take them to a sanctuary. John fielded them all with his usual steady calm, but the truth clawed at him. His daughter was already too attached. That evening, when he came home, Emily was still curled by the fire, the cubs asleep across her lap. Her small voice rose as he hung his hat. "You can't take them away, can you?" John froze. "Emily, they don't have anybody else," she said, stroking one cub's ear. "I can be their family, just like you're mine." The sheriff's throat tightened. The law said one thing, his daughter's heart said another. And deep inside, John Carter knew this was bigger than rules. He crouched beside her, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "We'll figure something out," he murmured. And in that cabin, on that frozen Montana night, a promise was made. Emily and the cubs were family now. Winter thawed slowly into spring. What began as a single night stretched into weeks. The cubs grew stronger, friskier, their coats glossy under Emily's relentless care. She named them Ash and Willow after the two trees outside her bedroom window. John told himself every day that he would call animal control. Every day he found a reason to wait. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe when the cubs were stronger. Maybe after Emily's birthday. But deep down, he knew the truth. They weren't leaving. Neighbors whispered, hunters scoffed, but whenever John looked at his daughter running barefoot in the yard, two bears tumbling after her, her laughter echoing across the hills, he couldn't bring himself to end it. She was healing, and in a way, so was he. But not everyone was blind to the danger. One evening, as John drove home from patrol, he spotted tracks by the tree line. Massive paw prints, too wide to be from the cubs.
Wolves. He tightened his grip on the wheel. The forest was watching, waiting. Inside the cabin, Emily fed Ash and Willow bits of cornbread under the table, giggling when their tongues tickled her palms. She had no idea that beyond the glow of the windows, shadows moved. Hungry, patient shadows. And though the Carters didn't know it yet, the bond Emily had formed with her bears was not just saving them, it was preparing them all for a battle that would test the very meaning of family.
The first snow of winter clung to the sheriff's boots as he walked across the yard. His breath steamed in the air, but his eyes stayed on the two bear cubs curled up against Emily. She was on her knees, arms wrapped around their furry necks, her small face pressed into their thick coats. The cubs, almost a year old now, had grown strong and wild, still gentle with Emily, but no longer the helpless orphans they once were. "Daddy!" Emily's voice cracked as she looked up at him. Her cheeks were wet with tears. "Please, don't make them leave. They're my family." Sheriff John adjusted the brim of his hat, the weight of duty pressing harder than the cold. His badge gleamed faintly in the porch light. Behind him, two deputies waited, their faces stiff, knowing what had to be done, but hating every second of it. "They are family, baby girl," John said softly. His deep voice trembled. "But they're not meant to live in a backyard. They're wild, and the longer they stay here, the more danger they'll be in. From hunters, from other bears, even from us." Emily hugged them tighter. One of the cubs licked her cheek, sensing her distress. The other pawed at the snow, letting out a confused whine. "You don't understand," Emily sobbed. "They need me. They'll be scared without me." Sheriff John knelt down, his weathered hand resting gently on her shoulder. "And you think Mama Bear wasn't scared, fighting off that wolf pack for them?" His voice softened, almost breaking. "She gave her life so these two could grow up wild and free. If we keep them here, we'd be undoing her sacrifice." Emily's lips quivered. She wanted to argue, to scream, to beg, but deep down, she knew he was right. She was only 9 years old, yet in her heart, she understood what sacrifice meant. Sheriff John reached into his coat and pulled out 2 small leather cords. Each held a hand-carved wooden pendant. One had the outline of a star, the other a simple heart. "These will keep them safe. Any hunter or ranger who sees these will know they're your bears. No one will harm them." Emily's hands shook as she tied the heart around the smaller cub's neck. Her tears dripped onto its fur. "Promise me," she whispered to the bear. "Promise me you'll remember me." The cub nuzzled her, letting out a soft huff of breath. She turned to the bigger cub, fastening the star around its thick neck. "And you? Take care of him. Take care of both of you. Please." Sheriff John swallowed hard. He couldn't watch much longer. "It's time," he said hoarsely. Emily buried her face in their fur one last time. The cubs whimpered, sensing the shift. When she finally let go, her hands clung to the air as though refusing to release them fully. The deputies opened the gate that led into the forest. The cubs hesitated, turning back toward Emily. "Go," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Go before I can't let you." Slowly, one step at a time, the cubs padded into the snowy woods. They turned back once, eyes glowing in the moonlight, before vanishing into the trees. Emily fell to her knees, her sobs echoing through the still night. Sheriff John pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as she shook against his chest. "You did the bravest thing a person can do," he murmured into her hair. "You loved them enough to let them go." But Emily didn't feel brave. She felt broken. As the snow kept falling, she whispered into the night, "Come back to me someday. Please, come back." The streets of the small mountain town glowed with Christmas lights, every lamppost wrapped in garland, every window glowing with warmth.
Emily adjusted her scarf as she stepped out of her apartment building, the snow crunching beneath her boots. She was 26 now, no longer the wide-eyed little girl who once begged her father to keep 2 orphaned cubs in their backyard. But even as she clicked the sleek fob of her brand-new car, she couldn't stop the flash of memory. 2 cubs pressing their warm faces against her cheek, necklaces glinting in the moonlight, their shapes fading into the forest. That night had never left her. Her father had been right. They couldn't stay. Still, sometimes, especially around Christmas, she swore she heard them in her dreams. Emily shook the thought away and slid into the car. The interior glowed softly, futuristic screens lighting up as the vehicle came to life. She smiled faintly. "Merry Christmas to me," she whispered. The car purred onto the snow-covered road, its sensors pinging softly as she headed toward her father's cabin on the far side of the valley. He was still sheriff, still respected, and still stubborn as ever. He laughed when she told him she was buying the car. "City toys don't belong in mountain country," he'd said. "Maybe not, but this one will get me home in one piece." Her heart warmed at the thought of seeing him again. It had been months since they'd last shared a meal. She pictured the cabin, the crackling fireplace, the smell of pine, her father's gruff laugh. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt like the world was exactly where it should be. Snow thickened as she climbed the winding mountain pass. The car's AI adjusted, headlights cutting sharp beams into the swirling dark. Christmas music played softly on the radio, and Emily hummed along, tapping the wheel with one gloved hand. Then came the lights. 2 glaring beams in the rearview mirror, too fast, too close. A semi-truck barreled around the curve behind her, its horn blaring, the driver reckless in the storm. Emily's stomach dropped. Oh no! She tightened her grip, steering steady, but the truck was closing fast, skidding on ice, losing control. Its massive grille loomed larger and larger in her mirror. "Please slow down." The impact came like thunder. Her car lurched forward, metal screaming as the truck plowed into the rear. The guardrail crumpled. Emily screamed as the car broke through, spinning into empty air. For a heartbeat, time froze. She saw the valley below, black trees dusted with snow, the faint twinkle of the sheriff's cabin miles away. Then gravity took her. The car tumbled down the mountainside, glass shattering, airbags exploding around her. Emily's world spun in a blur of snow and steel, her body thrown helplessly inside the cocoon of the car. Every crash against the rocks sent shockwaves through her bones. Finally, with a shuddering crunch, the vehicle slammed to a stop halfway down the slope, wedged between boulders. Steam hissed from the hood. Emily gasped, sucking in air, the taste of blood on her tongue. Her hands shook, but miraculously, she was alive. The car had saved her, its frame crumpled but intact, airbags deflating slowly around her. She touched her forehead. Blood trickled from a cut, but nothing felt broken. Her chest heaved with disbelief. "Thank you," she whispered, to the car, to God, to anyone who had heard her prayers. But the silence was wrong, too still, too heavy. She pushed the door open, stumbling into the snow, boots sinking deep. The wrecked car hissed behind her, its lights flickering faintly in the dark. She pulled her coat tighter, scanning the endless trees. Then she heard it. A howl, low, haunting, rising through the pines. Her breath caught. Another howl joined it, then another. Soon the night was alive with them, echoing from every direction. The same sound she had heard once before, long ago when a mother bear gave her life to protect her cubs. Wolves. Emily's pulse skyrocketed. She scrambled back toward the car, but the car was sparking, too dangerous to shelter in. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Her father's name lit the screen. She answered with shaking hands. "Dad, I had an accident. The car, it'd been off the road." "Emily," His voice was sharp, urgent. "Stay calm. Where are you?" "I don't know. I'm in the forest, down the mountain." "Stay on the line. Don't hang up. I'm coming for you." Before she could reply, the first wolf appeared. Yellow eyes gleamed from the tree line, its shadow sharp against the snow. Then another slipped into view, and another, a dozen shapes closing in, circling her with slow, deliberate steps. Emily's breath came in gasps, her heart hammering against her ribs. She stumbled back, clutching the phone. "Dad, they're here." "Wolves?" "Yes." "Emily, listen to me. Don't run. Whatever you do, but fear one." With a scream, Emily turned and bolted into the trees. The pack lunged after her, snow exploding beneath their paws, snarls tearing through the night. Her father's voice screamed through the phone, "Emily, no!" The device slipped from her hand, vanishing into the snow as she ran blind, branches clawing at her coat, her breath ripping from her lungs. The wolves gained ground, their growls closing in, hot breath snapping at her heels. Emily's legs burned, her vision blurred. She could hear their teeth snapping inches from her head, and then a roar split the night. Deep, thunderous, familiar. From the darkness, two massive shapes crashed into the wolves, sending bodies flying. Fur and claws and blood filled the air. Emily stumbled to a stop, eyes wide, chest heaving. She knew those roars. She knew them in her soul. The bears. Her bears. Necklaces glinting faintly in the moonlight. The two brothers she had once loved with all her heart now stood before her, grown, powerful, furious. And they were here to save her.
The forest erupted into chaos. Wolves launched from the shadows, their snarls tearing through the night. But they were met in midair by claws the size of knives. One bear swung his paw with bone-crushing force, splitting a wolf in half before it hit the ground. The other reared onto his hind legs, roaring so loud it shook snow from the trees, then came crashing down on another attacker, smashing its rib cage into the frozen earth. Emily stumbled backward, her breath a cloud of panic. She had no weapon, no escape. All she could do was watch as her world turned into a storm of blood and fury. Wolves darted in from every angle, teeth flashing. The bigger bear caught one by the throat and shook it so violently its neck snapped with a crack. Another wolf lunged at his flank. He turned, biting down with jaws that crushed bone like dry sticks. But the pack was relentless. For every wolf that fell, another slipped from the darkness. They darted low, aiming for legs, tendons, soft flesh. The smaller bear roared in pain as teeth sank into his haunch, dragging him down. Emily screamed, "No!" The bigger bear whirled, slamming into the wolf that clung to his brother. His claws ripped the predator's belly open, spilling steam and blood across the snow. The smaller bear staggered up, limping but defiant, and lunged at another attacker with renewed fury. It was brutal, savage, a war between wild titans. And then Emily saw it. The star pendant, swinging wildly from the bigger bear's neck as he fought. It caught the moonlight gleaming like a beacon in the storm. Her breath froze, her chest tightened. No, it can't be. Her eyes darted to the smaller bear. The heart pendant dangled from his neck, slick with blood but unmistakable. Tears filled her eyes, her throat closed. "It's you," she whispered, then louder, screaming as though her voice could pierce the frenzy. "It's you, my boys! Fight, please, fight!" The bears roared as if answering her. They tore into the wolves with renewed rage, their movements faster, sharper, more savage. They weren't just fighting to survive, they were fighting for her. Emily's heart pounded, her hands trembling helplessly. She wanted to run to them, to throw herself at their sides, but she knew she'd only get them killed. All she could do was watch as her world turned into a storm of blood and fury. Wolves darted in from every angle, teeth flashing.
The bigger bear caught one by the throat and shook it so violently its neck snapped with a crack. Another wolf lunged at his flank. He turned, biting down with jaws that crushed bone like dry sticks. But the pack was relentless. For every wolf that fell, another slipped from the darkness. They darted low, aiming for legs, tendons, soft flesh. The smaller bear roared in pain as teeth sank into his haunch, dragging him down. Emily screamed, "No!" The bigger bear slammed that alpha into a tree, teeth locked onto his throat. The bear roared in agony, his paws clawing wildly, snow exploding beneath them. For a terrifying moment, Emily thought he was losing. But then he twisted. With a burst of primal strength, he sank his teeth into the wolf's skull and crushed it like an eggshell. The alpha went limp, blood pouring into the snow. The remaining wolves froze, their leader gone, their hunger no longer enough to overcome fear. One by one, they slunk back into the trees, howls fading into the night. Silence. The clearing was a graveyard of bodies, the snow painted red. Steam rose from torn flesh. Emily's chest heaved as her legs gave out. She fell into the snow, tears streaming down her face. The two bears stood there, panting, their fur matted with blood, some of it theirs, some of it not. The bigger bear limped heavily, his shoulder torn open. The smaller one's haunch bled badly, leaving crimson trails in the snow. But they were alive. Emily crawled toward them, sobbing openly now. When she reached them, she threw her arms around their massive necks, pressing her face into their blood-soaked fur without a thought for fear. "My boys," she whispered through her tears, "you came back to me. After all these years, you came back." The bigger bear rumbled softly, lowering his massive head against her shoulder. The smaller one nudged her gently, almost playfully, as if to say, "We never forgot." Emily clung to them, crying and laughing at the same time. For the first time since she was 9 years old, the hole in her heart felt whole again. But as her sobs quieted, her father's words echoed in her head. "They're wild. They'll always be wild." And somewhere in the distance, another roar shook the night.
The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Emily's heart still hammered against her ribs from the wolf attack. Snow stuck to her cheeks where tears and sweat had frozen. Her legs trembled, but she couldn't tell if it was from fear, cold, or the shock of still being alive. The two bears stood like guardians in the moonlight, their massive chests heaving, fur streaked with blood, most of it not their own. The battlefield around them was littered with dark stains in the snow where wolves had fallen or fled, tails between their legs. Emily stumbled forward, nearly falling before her knees sank into the powder. Her hands reached out instinctively, brushing against the thick fur of the nearest bear, the one with the little heart-shaped pendant still dangling from his neck. You came back," she whispered, her voice breaking into sobs. "I thought I lost you forever." The bear rumbled low in his chest, almost like a purr, leaning into her touch. His brother, marked by the star-shaped pendant, sat heavily in the snow, a long gash across his flank still dripping red. Emily gasped and scrambled to him. "Oh no, no, stay with me," she cried, pulling at her coat and tearing off the bottom hem to press against the wound. Her hands were shaking, but she forced herself to press down firmly. "I'm not losing you, not after all this time." The bear groaned but didn't move away, his great golden eyes fixed on her, and for a moment Emily was a child again, feeding two frightened cubs scraps of bread behind her father's house, whispering promises she never thought she'd have to keep. "You're still my family," she said, her voice fierce now despite the tears. "You'll always be my family." The brothers stayed still, letting her work. She tied the makeshift bandages best she could, whispering encouragement like she used to when they were small. And for a fleeting moment, despite the blood and the danger, there was peace in the forest. But peace never lasts. Emily noticed it first, the way the wind died, the way the forest seemed to hold its breath. Even the wolves that had fled minutes ago didn't make a sound. The air grew heavy, pressing down on her chest until her lungs ached. The star-marked bear suddenly lifted his head, ears pricked. His brother stiffened, a growl rumbling deep in his chest. The snow around them shimmered faintly in the moonlight, and then, crack! A tree snapped somewhere in the darkness. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Emily flinched, spinning around, her breath fogging in the freezing air. And then she saw it. From between the trees lumbered a monster. The bear was enormous, easily twice the size of the brothers. His fur was dark, matted with scars of old battles. One eye was clouded, a pale milky white, while the other burned like amber fire. His shoulders rolled with muscle, and his roar when it came was so loud it seemed to shake the very ground. Emily's stomach dropped. She didn't need anyone to explain. This was the reason the brothers had stayed away all those years. This was the predator that ruled this part of the forest, the titan of the wild. The giant grizzly lowered his head, sniffing the air. His lips peeled back, revealing fangs longer than Emily's fingers. He wasn't hungry. He was angry. This was his land, and trespassers had dared spill blood on it. Emily stumbled backward, her body locking in primal terror. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't obey. The titan's gaze fell on her. For a heartbeat, she thought she could see her death in his single good eye. But then, the brothers moved. Both bears stepped forward in unison, planting themselves between Emily and the approaching monster. The wounded one staggered, but he didn't retreat. They didn't even look back at her, just squared their shoulders and faced the threat head-on. "No," Emily gasped, scrambling to her feet. You can't fight him. He'll kill you." The titan roared again, louder this time, snow shaking loose from the trees above. The sound drove Emily to her knees, hands clamped over her ears. Her heart was going to burst from her chest. And still, the brothers didn't move. Their growls rose like thunder, teeth bared, muscles tensed. They knew the cost. They knew this fight might be their last. But family was family. Tears blurred Emily's vision as she screamed, "Please, don't do this. Don't leave me again." The titan lowered his head and charged. The ground shook under his weight. Snow exploded beneath his paws as he thundered forward, a living avalanche of rage and muscle. The brothers braced themselves, side by side, refusing to yield an inch. Emily's scream tore through the forest as the three bears collided in an explosion of fury. And then there was only chaos.
The world became nothing but blood, snow, and roars. The titan slammed into the brothers like a freight train. The impact shook the earth, knocking Emily backward into the snow. She barely had time to lift her head before she saw one of her bears, the one with the star pendant, hurled across the clearing. He landed hard, a spray of blood marking his trail as he rolled and scrambled to his feet, staggering but still alive. The titan turned on the other brother. His jaws clamped down on the heart-marked bear's shoulder, teeth sinking deep. The sound that came out of the young bear was so raw, so agonizing, that Emily's chest split open with grief. "No!" she screamed, scrambling to her feet, her hands frozen and useless. "Let him go!" The titan shook his head violently, ripping flesh. Blood sprayed across the snow like crimson paint. The wounded bear roared back, swiping with claws that raked deep furrows into the titan's face, but the monster didn't release him. The star-marked brother lunged back into the fight, slamming into the titan's side with all his weight. The impact made the giant stumble for the first time, and the heart-marked brother tore free, collapsing into the snow. Emily ran forward, tears streaming down her face. She didn't care about the danger anymore. She scooped up a fist-sized rock and hurled it at the titan's head. It bounced off his skull like a pebble against a boulder,
but it drew his good eye toward her. For one frozen heartbeat, Emily found herself staring into the gaze of death. That burning amber eye locked onto her, and she knew he saw her not as prey, but as a trespasser who deserved no mercy. The Titan roared and charged. "Come on!" Emily screamed, standing her ground, her voice cracking from terror. "You want me? Take me!" But before the beast reached her, both brothers struck. The star-marked bear launched himself onto the Titan's back, digging claws into the thick muscle, biting into the back of his neck. The other, bloodied and limping, forced himself up and lunged for the Titan's throat. The clearing became a hurricane of fur and flesh. Snow churned under their weight. Teeth tore chunks of meat. Claws ripped open hide. The Titan fought like a god of war, slamming one brother into the ground, then throwing himself backward to crush the other. Bones cracked, blood poured, but still the brothers refused to fall. Emily fell to her knees, hands clutching her head. She screamed their names like they could understand, begged them to run, begged them not to die for her. The Titan roared again, rearing up on his hind legs. He was a tower of muscle and rage silhouetted against the moon. Both brothers lunged at him, biting, clawing, striking, but he was too strong. With a single swipe, he sent the heart-marked bear crashing into a tree. The trunk cracked in half, the bear slumping motionless into the snow. "No!" Emily's scream ripped the night apart. She scrambled toward him, tears blinding her. The Titan lowered his head to finish the job. And then, crack! A gunshot shattered the air. The Titan froze mid-strike, his head jerking sideways as a bullet tore into his shoulder. His roar turned from fury to rage and pain as searchlights cut through the trees, painting the battlefield in blinding beams of white. "Emily!" She spun around. Through the blinding light, she saw her father, Sheriff Daniels, charging forward with his deputies. Dozens of rifles gleamed. Men shouted, boots pounded against the snow. "Dad!" she sobbed, stumbling toward him. He caught her in his arms, pulling her tight against his chest. "Oh God, Emily!" he choked, clutching her face, his eyes wide with relief and horror. Behind them, the Titan roared and turned toward the new threat.
"Open fire!" Daniels barked. The night exploded with gunfire. Dozens of bullets ripped into the Titan's body. Blood sprayed in arcs, staining the snow black in the moonlight. But the monster didn't fall. He charged through the storm of bullets, each thunderous step shaking the ground, eyes locked on Emily. "Dad, stop!" Emily screamed, grabbing her father's arm. "Don't let them kill the brothers! Just him! Just him!" The Titan barreled closer. Deputies reloaded, panic shouts echoing as men stumbled back. Emily saw the star-marked brother stagger to his feet, covered in blood but still standing. He limped in front of her again, body broken, refusing to let the Titan reach her. The Titan reared back, ready to crush them all. Daniels made the call. "Aim for the big one! Take him down!" Crack, crack, crack. A volley of bullets tore through the Titan's chest and throat. His roar turned into a gurgle. He staggered, taking another step, another, and then collapsed forward, the earth shaking as his body hit the snow. Silence. Emily fell to her knees, staring at the fallen monster, her chest heaving. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All she knew was that it was over. Her father dropped beside her, pulling her close. "You're safe now, baby girl. You're safe." But Emily shoved free, stumbling to the heart-marked bear's side. He lay in a pool of blood, his breath shallow, his pendant glinting faintly in the searchlights. "No, no, no," she sobbed, cradling his massive head in her arms. "You can't dare leave me. You can't. You hear me? You can't." The star-marked brother limped over, collapsing beside them, his golden eyes fixed on her with a look she swore was almost human. Sheriff Daniels stood above them, lowering his rifle.
For a long moment, the men behind him didn't move, didn't speak. They just watched a woman weep over the two bloodied creatures that had fought like family to save her life. Daniels finally spoke, his voice rough. "Get medics. Now. We're not letting these boys die tonight." Emily clutched the brothers tighter, her tears soaking their fur. "You're not alone anymore. Not ever again." The Titan was dead, but the bond between girl and bear burned stronger than ever, forged in blood, sealed in battle, unbreakable.
The forest was still bleeding when dawn came. Snow lay in tatters, churned into mud and crimson. Broken branches jutted like bones from the earth, and the smell of iron still clung to the air. Emily sat in the middle of it all, her coat soaked through, her hands sticky with blood that wasn't her own. One bear lay with his massive head in her lap, breathing raggedly. The other was curled close by, too weak to stand, but alive. Her father crouched beside her, one strong hand resting on her shoulder. For hours, neither of them spoke. There was nothing to say. They just listened to the bears breathe, each rise and fall of their chests proof that the nightmare was finally over. By morning, help had arrived. Trucks pulled up at the edge of the clearing. Deputies, park rangers, and even a local wildlife vet rushed forward, eyes wide at the sight of the two massive animals lying beside the sheriff's daughter like family dogs. "What in God's name?" one ranger whispered. "They're not just bears," Sheriff Daniels said firmly, his voice carrying weight. "They're heroes. Treat them as such." No one argued. The medics worked on Emily first, wrapping her bruised ribs, cleaning the gash on her forehead, checking her for broken bones. But she barely noticed. Her eyes never left the bears. "Help them," she begged. "Please, they saved me." The vet nodded quickly. With tranquilizer darts, painkillers, and stitching kits, a small team set to work on the wounded brothers. It was rough, makeshift, but it was something. Emily never let go of their paws, whispering encouragement like she had when they were cubs. "You're strong. You're not leaving me. Not now." When one bear whimpered in pain, she kissed his head. When the other flinched, she sang softly under her breath, the same lullaby she remembered her mother singing before she passed. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, melting the blood-streaked snow into rivulets that trickled away into the earth. By midday, the brothers were stable enough to be moved. 2 flatbed trucks carried them into town under heavy guard, not because anyone feared them anymore, but because the entire county wanted to see the miracle girl and her bears. By the time Emily stepped out of the sheriff's SUV, her clothes had been changed and her wounds bandaged, but she still looked like a survivor pulled from war. The townsfolk lined the streets, phones filmed, voices whispered. Children stared wide-eyed at the sight of the 2 massive animals, lying sedated but alive, each wearing the same necklaces Sheriff Daniels had given them years ago. "That's them," someone said. "The sheriff's girl raised those bears." "They fought off wolves and another bear?" "No, they saved her." Emily kept her head down, embarrassed by the weight of their stares. But then, out of nowhere, applause broke out. First one man, then a woman, then the whole crowd. Not applause for her, but for the bears. Emily turned to look. The sound grew louder, echoing off the brick walls of Main Street, as if the whole town had decided in that moment that these creatures weren't monsters, they were guardians. Her eyes burned with tears. She smiled through them. The brothers were taken to a wildlife sanctuary just outside town. It wasn't freedom, but it wasn't captivity either. It was a place of safety, of space, of second chances. Emily visited every day, sometimes with her father, sometimes alone. She sat with them as they healed, telling them stories of her work, of the world outside the forest, of everything they had missed. One day, when their stitches were nearly healed, she brought her laptop and showed them videos. Snowstorms, campfires, even footage of the town parade that now bore a new name.
The Guardians March. "You're legends now," she told them with a grin. "Heroes." The bears didn't understand the words, but they understood her tone, her laughter, her love. Spring came at last. The snow melted. The forest grew green again. Emily knew the time had come. She stood at the edge of the sanctuary with her father by her side as the gates were opened. The brothers stood inside, strong again, their fur gleaming in the sunlight. They looked at her, then at the forest. Her chest ached. Part of her wanted to beg them to stay, but she knew. They didn't belong behind fences. They belonged out there, wild and free. She stepped forward, laying a hand on each massive head one last time. "You'll always be my family," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But it's time for you to go be what you were meant to be. Bears, kings of the wild." The brothers rumbled deep in their chests, nuzzling her shoulders, almost as if they understood. Then slowly, they turned and lumbered into the trees. Emily watched until they vanished into the green. She stood there long after, tears streaming down her face, her father's arm around her shoulders. "They'll be back," Sheriff Daniels said softly. "In their own way. Family always comes back." She nodded, clutching the heart-shaped pendant she now wore on a chain of her own. Years later, Emily would still tell the story of the night wolves came for her, of the moment the Titan of the Wild nearly ended her life, of the two bears who chose to stand and fight, not because they had to, but because family was family, no matter what form it took. And every Christmas, when snow dusted the forest and the world seemed quiet, she would drive out to the sanctuary and leave food at the tree line. Sometimes, when the moon was high, she swore she saw shapes moving in the distance, massive, powerful, familiar, watching, protecting. The bond was never broken, and it never would be.